I thought it might be interesting to talk with you a little bit about Oklahoma, the bombing there, and the chaplain's role, your role in that, and what you have to say about what you're seeing now in light of, being there. I mean, you're a chaplain who is on the ground, and I'm really think a lot of people would be interested to hear, like, how did it start? Tell me about your day that day. How did it begin for you?
Well, that morning was a day that the leadership team was going to meet at 9 o'clock. And so I think it was 9 o'clock in the morning. We met in the hospital auditorium, probably 120 of us there. Oh, maybe more like 80. So we're having a meeting. All of a sudden, the building just shook like a one jolt earthquake. It was an amazing stunner. We all just kind of stopped everything. And the auditorium has a pretty high ceiling. And it's also sprayed with insulation and sound deadener. And the stuff just began to flake on down from the ceiling. All these insulation pieces came down from the way the building got jolted. The building's poured concrete. So that's what got us up. And me and a woman named Sally, who was head of the volunteer services. She and I ran outside the building to get on top of the parking garage to see what happens. I mean, I thought a gasoline truck blew up in front of the hospital.
Yes.
She thought the life flight helicopter slammed into the building.
Oh.
So we got up there, and we could see southwest of the building a huge white cloud followed by billowing black clouds. And so that's what let us know there was something downtown that exploded. We weren't sure what it was, but we got back inside the building, and very soon the local news was on, and it was the Alfred P. Moore building. It was the federal government building. The different agencies lived there. So I was worried because my wife's law office is a block away from there. But they were south of the building. The blast went north, which took out half the building, but things didn't go south very much. So I tried to call her, and all the lines in the hospital were tied up. So what I did was I went to the payphone, and the payphone worked.
Wow.
And I got a hold of her, and she was fine. She wasn't sure what happened. I was afraid she was walking over to the federal courthouse, which often she does in her law work. And so, but she was safe, and I was relieved. So I got back to the office, and everybody's scrambling around. And the hospital implemented its emergency response protocol. So we went on down there and set all that up, got a telephone set up. We got our pads out to take names of who was coming to the hospital. We began to network with other people in the hospital, security or the police were working with that, public relations, administration.
Excuse me, the phones were working then, Ken? You could actually make those phone calls and get in touch with people?
Not outside, not early on. All the public lines were tied up. And there were no cell phones back there.
You're talking about internally then?
Internally, yeah. We made our calls. The external telephones came back on maybe half hour later, I think. But so we were working internally for phones for ourselves. And later on, we began to call hospitals as well to find out who they were getting in, because families started looking for loved ones.
Yes.
And that was our responsibility, was to really gather the names of who was there at the hospital, to support them and stay with them and see what we can help out with.
Was it a rush of people all at once, or was it people just drifting in, looking for loved ones? How did they come to the hospital? What did it look like?
Well, the ones who came in the emergency room were brought from the Mural building, and then they came in actually civilian vehicles. Some people had, minivans,
Yeah.
pickup trucks. They just drove to the hospital with these patients. So they started to stream into the emergency room, and so that was very crowded, very, very backed up. We got, I think, I used to think 80, but then I realized we got probably 90 patients in an hour and a half, trying to pack them in and, triaging them. So we had a chaplain where we're manning or staffing the emergency room. We were staffing the auditorium. There were set up clinical sites beyond the ER to do triage and treatment. So we had a big area down in physical therapy. So we had a chaplain down there visiting people. When we met the families in the ER, most of these people had injuries that were kind of bloody, extremity injuries, arms, legs, face, neck, kind of bloody. The ones with serious trauma down at that bomb site, mostly all those died. We only got a couple of those patients that survived the trauma, big trauma like that, for our hospital. Maybe we had 6.
So what was, I'm sure I can visualize it, but could you describe what it was like to have all those families gathered in the auditorium and you responsible for their support? What was that like? What did it look like? What did it feel like?
Well, it looked like just a crowd control. People were wandering around in the auditorium. They wanted to get out. One of the things we found out, and we weren't aware then, is that right outside the auditorium was a hallway to the ER. And the families wanted to stay by the ER to see who was coming and going. We didn't expect that. So we try to keep them inside and tell them, we'll let you know who's coming and going. We'll keep the names. But basically, it was hard to get them to sit inside the auditorium. They were just too concerned and looking for their loved ones. Often families came to our hospital, not because their families were here. They didn't know that.
Yes.
But they had used this hospital before, and they were familiar with it.
Yes.
So they came where it was familiar.
Yes. What was the name of the hospital?
Presbyterian.
Presbyterian. What did it feel like? Were you able to contain the families in the auditorium?
Yes, we were. We did a terrific job with that. We have plenty of room. We got the phone set up that we can call other hospitals.
So as you were able to call out names and you found out names, people became calmer. They saw that you had a system.
Yeah, and the names we got were the names of the people that admissions had picked up coming through the ER.
Yes.
And they had a list, and that list went to us, it went to the security, and it went to public relations. It was also connecting to other hospitals in the city.
So from that meeting that morning, when did you get to leave that night? When was it over for you?
That was 9 o'clock at night. It was 9 o'clock I left. Well, that day, later in the afternoon, the hard part for me was seeing families coming in looking for their parents. You would see a group of boys and girls from high school. The boys had their caps on backwards and dressed like kids do, trying to find their parents. Some brought pictures, and we would try to connect the names we had. Yeah, it was the names we had on our list, and then they would clarify the list, and we were in touch with the other hospitals in the city. So we had a list of those people, as well as they had a list of our people.
Yes.
So someone could want to see somebody. We could say, no, he's not here, but he is at St. Anthony's Hospital,
Yes.
or he's at a Baptist hospital,
Yes.
or he's at St. Anthony's Hospital. Just to see these kids. And I had no answer.
Because their parents' name was not on your list, it wasn't on the other hospitals.
Yeah, right. And so we knew it was bad. I mean, I said, we probably had 90 people come through our ER. Probably 26 spent the night, but the others were sent home. They were all bloody and bad, banged up. I had one African American guy who came in. I forget his name now, but he came in the hospital, and he got some glass and other metal around his neck, so he was pretty bloody. His clothes were bloody, and but his family arrived looking for us. We were able to connect him with the family. He already had been asked to go to a room, so we connected them together, and that was one of the happy moments.
Yes. So you knew that if the name that you were being asked was not on any of those lists, the probability was that they were dead.
Yeah, at least they weren't brought to our hospital, but we were sharing lists
Yes.
of our patients.
Yes.
So if we couldn't find the list, often if someone had died at St. Anthony's,
Yes.
we would send the family on down there.
So what did you say to the family when there was no name, there was nothing? What would you say to those kids?
I would say, I'm sorry, I don't have a name. But what I also could say was, we're getting your names all the time of other people. Why don't you stay here with us? We provided lunch for everybody and drinks, and try to make them feel at home and have their needs met. Why don't you stay with us? As we get other names, we'll announce them in the auditorium. And we get more names for us, we'll announce those as well.
So tell me about how that felt for you as a chaplain that administered to all those people that day. You found out the circumstances.
Yeah, we found out this was not a natural gas explosion.
Yes.
Or a light flight helicopter crash. We realized it was an intentional thing done by, as the day went on, I think they had his name either that day or the next day, who he was, Timothy McVeigh.
Yeah.
But he was a veteran. So we knew it was a disaster. We knew it was intentional.
Yes.
And I began to think maybe international, because there have been other, violent things, and.
So I'm wondering how it felt to you after being with all these people, these children, seeing the bloody mess that it was, and finding out that it was an American, that it was intentional, that you were a chaplain to these people who were in the dead middle of it. How did you take that?
Well, I just realized how senseless this whole thing was. You understand someone's purpose, but this had no purpose. I'll get to the theology of that before we finish today. But for me, it was just sad. Also, something else I realized that day, my adrenaline had kicked in. So I was trying to get all these tasks done. We only had one staff chaplain and two other supervisors, and we had 8 CPE residents. And that's who did the bulk of the work, were the residents.
Yes.
So we had scheduled them that night to be in the auditorium and to be by the ER and staff that as well, so they could stay with them.
Yeah.
Do our best to minister to the needs of people. We also had a family waiting room for the intensive care unit, and there are a number of families in there whose loved ones were still in the ICU unit. So we staffed that room as well, and those people stayed all night.
Yes.
And it was 9 o'clock before I went home, only when I felt that place was adequately staffed and my staff were doing okay. But all of us were pumped up on adrenaline.
How'd you deal with that when you got home? How did you what happened that you come down from that?
I got home and I saw Audrey and talked. I didn't come down until Saturday morning.
Yeah.
It just went on for days. And you have these tasks to complete. You got to report to administration. You got to work with PR, security, still with families. We got some more beds in the family waiting room. I was just wound up with the task of helping people out.
Yeah.
You had to take care of.
So when you see these explosions and these terror attacks now, does it take you back to that day? The terror and the fear and all of that. Do you think about Oklahoma? Can you see that?
Well, you know, it's interesting. The only other place this has happened like that to that extent was New York City,
Yeah.
with the World Trade Center coming down. And they had invited me to go out and work, you know, the bomb site, because I was known for working in Oklahoma City. But frankly, my hospital staff was re-traumatized in 2001 by the damage. And so I felt I had to stay with my staff, kind of my family. So I didn't go to New York City.
Tell me, can you describe what that looked like? What happened to people? What did they say about that? How did you know they were re-traumatized? What was going on?
Oh, the staff?
Yeah.
People were crying. Some staff just went home. We had people quit their jobs, walk out. They just brought it on back. See, when the explosion happened, we were a 7-story hospital. And they thought that was the target with bigger buildings. So they wanted to get the hell out of the building, which in 2001 they did. And a lot of federal employees were transferred as they rebuilt the federal buildings on downtown.
Yeah.
I think the tallest buildings were 2 stories. They didn't build any larger buildings because employees got too scared. But for me, it wasn't until Saturday morning that it really hit me what had happened. Because, you know, a lot of us were working like from, you know, we had nurses come in, we had extra doctors show up to work.
Yeah.
And what we did on Wednesday, one that really surprised me was they called a meeting of leadership at 1 o'clock to meet in administrative offices to talk about what we're going to do, what's happened, get updates from all the staff. So all of us in department directors gave our updates. And 2/3 of the way through the meeting, a nurse, the ER nurse, came running into the meeting. She said she just came from the bomb site. And we were talking about how we're going to staff to manage the next influx of patients. And she said, there'll be no more. The doctors in charge said, that's nonsense. We're going to get plenty of people here. Have your sutures ready, have all the material ready. We got 2 more patients. That's it. And the last we had the next day, on Thursday, we had the last Jane Doe. We had the last unknown patient in our hospital. We finally had a family on Thursday, about 1 in the afternoon. They came upstairs and said, yes, that's what's her name. That's her. And she was old. We still have families in the auditorium, in part because the 26 patients we had admitted to the hospital were not all discharged on Thursday. Maybe half of them were still there, or maybe 2/3. And the family waiting room wasn't big enough. So we kept them in the auditorium. We got some recliners to sleep in there. And that's how we try to support them throughout the day. And also trying to support my staff. I mean, we staffed the place with probably 4 residents, 3 residents around the clock.
How were they doing?
Well, they were getting worn out. The way it showed up on Friday night, one of our students was going to be the on-call person. And she had worked. And Audrey came on down to the office, and she and I had walked down to the bomb site to see what it looked like. And boy, the pictures can't capture what it looks like in person. So we came back to the hospital, kind of somber, and I came back to take care of a few things. As I was leaving, the on-call chaplain, she was just in tears. So I talked to her. So I just sent her home, and I stayed the night. You know, in situations like that, for me, you just have to go the extra mile. You just have to give. And that's what I did. Just give more. So I spent the night on call. And Saturday morning I got home, and I just collapsed in tears. Just worn out. So that's how I finally really sat down with my feelings and what happened. To have good students and 2 supervisors that help us pull things together for us.
Did you do some work afterward and when all of it kind of settled down with your?
Oh, yeah. You know, I didn't know anything about critical incident stress debriefing, you know, the Mitchell program. But a chaplain supervisor I knew in Wichita came on down. He was an FBI chaplain also, and he could tell me how that all worked. And so we started to do some debriefing with our staff, the ER staff, especially the surgery staff, and some others.
Can you tell me a little bit about how that works, what that is?
Well, critical incident stress debriefing is you sit down with the people, and there's certain steps you go through. One of them is you just let them tell me, what'd you see? You know, just go around the room and just everybody say what they saw. And then how'd you feel when you saw that? And then any thoughts come to mind. It reminds you of anything else in your life that was important. And do these debriefings with the hope that they then could kind of get the burden off their shoulders. Since then, by the way, critical incident stress debriefings has been challenged pretty severely by psychiatry and mental health workers. That it does more damage to re-traumatize the workers than help them. Now that's counterintuitive. You think talking would help, but that's not really what showed up. It wasn't that. So,
in your experience, you agree with that? You did not think that that was helpful?
Looking back,
yeah,
I think it helped people who were trying to help others. They felt they were helpful.
Yeah.
Results indicate that that's probably not the case now. Years later, research indicates that CISM, critical incident stress, management, may not be the way to go. I read that in psychiatric journals and other journals, articles about that, pastoral care and such. I'm not sure what the status of it is now today. I haven't gone back to read any updates on it. So things don't trigger me unless I revisit it like I am today. I don't revisit it very often anymore. And usually I don't have deep feelings. But as you know, I have other deep feelings on grief right now. And that's what this changed into for me. So it's not just one thing on a plate emotionally for me as I'm talking about this. I think what happened was on Saturday, I just felt relieved that I can get out of the hospital and that my staff were being taken care of. And I had some former residents came on back and we let them work in the hospital that night. And through the weekend, they just volunteered. So I can sit at my staff home and in the residence home. I still came in Sunday and checked things out, and Monday. On Monday, things had settled down quite a bit. Only the ones who were pretty badly injured were still in the hospital by Monday.
How many years had you been a chaplain when Oklahoma happened?
I've been a professional chaplain for 15 years. So one thing stands out to me that got me really pissed off, I mean really angry, was we had names of people the FBI were looking for identification purposes. And we had a family that showed up, and the FBI had just contacted us, which actually showed up looking for this family. And they were looking for the family because, as you know, they were just body parts after the first day.
Yes.
And there was a child that was killed in the morgue building, daycare center. The FBI was looking to identify the child through fingers, and fingerprints on toys. So the FBI was going to go to the house to dust for fingerprints on the kids' toys and the edge of the crib. So one of those families came in. So we had to send it back to the FBI. You know what I told my staff, told Audrey? If I knew being a chaplain would be doing that, I'd have gone done something else. It's just too painful. I never expected to have that role, to notify families like this about their babies. So I really thought, hell, I'd do something else rather than this. But you do it.
Yeah, I know that this is really, really so hard, and it's so great of you to share that.
That's what I thought. Hell, man, maybe I should do something else.
No, I think you're right where you need to be. I
got pissed. I
do think that this world is making all chaplains worry if that day is going to come to them. I think about it all the time at my hospital. When will that day show up for my staff?
Or maybe not at the hospital, but even a factory explosion nearby, something real bad trauma, unexpected.
Hearing you talk about this helps me to think about that happening. You made it through, and your staff made it through, and it's really encouraging, and it was great to talk with you. I hope it's been okay for you and not.
But by the way, after the bombing,
Yes.
I sat down with Jack Poe, who was the chaplain for the Oklahoma City Police Department. We had been in contact, because remember, they were still looking for body parts for 6 weeks at the site before they closed it up finally. So we, Jack Poe, and he and I were in contact constantly about stuff like this. So he and I sat down a couple weeks after they were done with the building, and we wrote up our experiences. And we noticed the difference between a lot of clergy showed up at our hospitals to volunteer, to help out.
Yes.
A lot of people volunteered. And we noticed there were distinctives between the volunteer local clergy and the clinically trained chaplains and how they functioned. So I wrote up a paper with 6 or 12 distinctives. What separates clinically trained chaplains from local clergy? I never got it published. But if you like, I'll send you a copy of it.
I wish you would send a copy, because what we can do is post it along with your interview.
Sure, I'll do that. Yeah.
When they see your interview, they can go and read what you've written about it. I think that would be fantastic.
And Jack and I noticed it was pretty clear. There were distinctives, you know?
Yes.
Local clergy get paid to talk. Chaplains get paid to listen.
Oh, I like that. I like that, Ken. That's the title of the paper, I hope.
No, I didn't give it a title. I separate local clergy from clinically trained chaplains and clergy, and what they did. And then I get a paragraph on trying to explain that to him. You know, one of the problems is that the people who volunteered showed up at the bomb site and at the hospital.
Yeah.
And spoke people in the ER. They were traumatized.
Yes.
Clinically trained chaplains usually work in an ER and have seen bodies mangled and bloody, stuff like this. Well, often local clergy don't see that. They see them when people are cleaned up. So they had a harder time and got traumatized by what they saw, when the clinically trained chaplains had already been through some of that with a supportive environment to talk about it and get clear about it and unload their feelings about it. Local clergy usually hadn't done that. By the way, when I got done, I realized I wrote this down, but I can't find my paper that I wrote them down on, which is 3 things I learned about God and us. I only remember 2 of them. The first one was, God cried with us. There was one of the memorials across from the Memorial Building was a Catholic church, old St. Joseph Cathedral. And they had a statue of a weeping Jesus with his back turned against the building. That came out of the fact that God wept with us. So we were not alone in our tears. The second point I don't recall right now. If I find my paper, I'll let you. But the third point I realize is that God believes in us. Usually it's us believe in God. But you know, you look back at the apostles, God turned the church over to a ragtag group of 12 people. And he continues to turn the church over. And because God had faith in us to respond adequately to what happened on that day. That was a great relief. I think that was for me an affirmation that we did a good job, that we can do it. I was very grateful for that.
I am really grateful you were there that day. I was watching on television, and to know that you were there and that you were helping all those people means so much to me.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
That it was you, that you were the one there. Strong and tough and mad and hurt. I'm just glad it was you, and I'm sorry you had to go through it, but I'm glad you were there for everybody. I love you, Ken. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for asking me to do this, Susan.
I'm
Good
really,
stuff. Thank you.